So we all, just to go for a brief of this, let's look at what a product manager does. Uh, the first thing a product manager primarily looks at is business objectives, business vision, and this is something that a product manager needs to understand quite well before even thinking of what needs to be developed or why it should be developed and for whom it should be developed. The product manager then goes ahead, and we hear this very often, right? That products. I think somebody is trying to play around here, but we'll figure that out. So product managers basically build products that customers love. We keep hearing this way too often. But let's plug that in along with the business vision, right? That's what's important for a product manager to do. Most importantly, a product manager creates the strategy or the product roadmap. And why do they do that? That's to build competitive advantage in the entire market ecosystem that's there. Now, this is a very basic outline what a product manager should be knowing and should understand in how they go forward. Most importantly, what a product manager does is a mindset. They bring a mindset to the entire organization. What sort of mindset? And that's the product ethos, right? If your mindset and the organization is not tuned to that mindset and that ethos of product management, it becomes very difficult to achieve that sustainable competitive advantage. It also becomes very difficult to understand and create that sort of organization where they're able to constantly get feedback from the industry and build products that customers like. Product management is not new. Product management has been there for a very long time. And if you look at it, in the past, product managers were called other names, primarily project managers when you went back to the 60s and 70s. Thereafter, they became program managers when the product portfolios became very large. They became program managers. In fact, there are some organizations even today that actually call them program managers, notably Microsoft also. They're transitioning, everybody's transitioning, and then now they're going into product management as the title. But the role has per se always existed for quite some time. Some notable names that you would all be knowing or probably like to know are very famous names, and these guys have primarily been product managers at some point in their career. Let's look at some of them. Very popular names: Steve Jobs. He was a product manager. The mindset and the approach was exactly what a product manager did and does today. Sundar Pichai, uh, Marissa Mayer from Yahoo. Not everybody may know Whitney Wolf, but she was one of the co-founders and designers behind Tinder. And then she came out, and now she's a billionaire. This year she was declared, I think, one of the youngest women billionaires, and she's a founder of Bumble. Not missing out, Satya Nadella. Even he has primarily been a product manager in his career. And what I'm trying to say is not that because you're going to be a product manager or because you are a product manager, you're going to become one of these guys. But what I'm trying to highlight here is that businesses are shifting slowly from a business-oriented, sales-oriented, or market-oriented approach to a product-oriented approach for the business leaders. Right? And this transition is coming from the larger organizations, and they're also going into the smaller organizations. And that's why we see a lot of the industries and companies in the startup ecosystem looking actively for product managers. Now, this is about product managers and product management, but let's see what's the current landscape, right? So what has changed right now from where we were maybe a year or two ago? And the first thing that comes to our mind is the COVID scenario. I mean, for all the negativity that's there around us and for everything that's happening around us, a lot of things have changed for many of us on the work front, on the personal front, on the social front, and all of it. But what key thing has changed for the markets and the dynamics in the markets with regards to product management and as a career in product management? And what we see is the supply demand, right? That's what's happening. Pre-COVID, we see there was a larger demand and the supply was lesser. So the growth was driven from the demand side. Now you need to pump in from the supply side after COVID. And what does this require? This requires something that can track one particular metric, that can analyze one particular metric and design products based on that one particular metric. And that is consumption, which is directly linked to user behavior. And this is where product managers play a very vital role now, and they have to play a very vital role. Product managers pre-COVID thought very differently or looked at consumers very differently. And now, based on the change in user behavior, they need to approach the entire product management with a very different thought process. And this is why things like, or topics like design thinking have become ever more important. Design thinking is a way of user-centric, user behavior analysis, right? I mean, that's the approach for product management. That's how it begins. And though there was design thinking before, it's become ever more important now to understand those, to understand cognitive behavior and cognitive skills understanding, cognitive psychological behavior. All of these things have become very important. And that sort of shapes how you ideate, how you look at a product, and how the customer would then be able to interact with that product. And this is not going down any soon. We're seeing it time and again. We had a wave last year, we have a second wave now, and we're seeing how the demand for product managers is going to be affected by how the market dynamics are going to change. It's not going to go down. It's only going to keep going up. On the other hand, what's also going to change is that we always see that the trend in India picks up gradually after the trend in the Western worlds have been established. As I said earlier, product management has been there for a while, but it is quite nascent in India, to be very honest. Companies only in the past probably 5 to 8 years have started looking at product management as a very serious role. And now it's beginning to mature. It's beginning to scale. And that's where we want to be, right? That's where we want to be when the demand for product managers comes in. What differently do product managers do currently, and why are organizations looking at product managers? From what I said in the change in behavior, consumer behavior, is to survive. And what's helping them survive is that these organizations are acting early. They're acting early in multiple things, right? From strategy to understanding how consumer behavior will change 6 months from now, how the demand would change, and how they would be able to supply to that demand, how they will be push out that demand. What they're looking at is not just 3 months or 6 months down, they're looking at 3 years, 5 years down the line. And that long-term perspective is very important. Finally, they're not just looking at optimization. Previously, we have seen companies trying to look at operational excellence, cost optimization, rationalization in terms of the human resources or the capital resources that they have. But now companies also need to focus tremendously on the growth aspect. And all these three, when you put them together for an organization to survive, it makes it even more important for them to look at product management as a very prime role. What are the chances of success then for a company, right? And there is a study that was done sometime late last year in 2020 that business model innovation is what kept companies going and growing even during and after the COVID scenario. Those that did not look at product management or were not focused on product management had 86% chances of failure in a business model, while compared to those who looked at product management had over 80% chances of success. Now, this is a very strong metrics, and this is available to primarily all the business leaders out there. And they know now that, yes, they need to look at many different things for their business success. And a role that can actually look at all those things collectively and cross-functionally is product management. And that brings me to say, to add more on how you should look at product management as an individual, as a professional. And I'll probably hear Colin Atin now to talk on his journey and share some more insights on building that roadmap to a strategy of going into product management. So I'd like to hand over to Atin.
Hi. Thank you, Kevin. Wow, that was 8:20 on sharp.
Thank you.
Wonderful. That sets a benchmark for me. Um, all right. So I'm just setting a timer as well, taking the cue from Kevin. So glad to meet everyone. Wonderful to see everyone here. And I'm just taking a look at. There's only a few videos on, but just taking a stock of that. So I wanted to cover today about how do you craft that transition to product management, and I think uh, as I as I was sharing in the teaser video that some of you all might have seen, that I think I relate a lot to this topic because I really was in complete chaos as I was going through this. Because so I'll just take you through the bits of this before coming to that. But my background in a nutshell is that I've had a very successful family business here based in Goa. And despite that, I have always been inclined to consistently learn and upskill myself for the future businesses that will be better. And I worked in the sales profile, business development within B2B companies, non-tech and tech, um, for many years, got a lot of high exposure. And that was really my background, right? Along with product program management roles. So my journey to product management started organically because, and my interest in it started because I was doing several 0 to 1 roles in these smaller startups, which are still very well doing in the B2B space, in hiring or in work automation. So being part of these 0 to 1 journeys in startups, I was also very entrepreneurial in my roles. I was doing program management. Uh, uh, I was coordinating a lot between teams and advocating a lot of different new initiatives. And I was also exposed a lot to technology in terms of AI and even operational wise, what internal tools as technology that we use. So I had that awareness and I had that interest in knowing how these things work from a technology perspective. So that was my journey towards considering it initially. But then when I wanted to crystallize it, I defined my goals as, after having done this exposure, I felt that when I looked at the larger, yeah, this would really come to the question of the confusion of deciding to this role. And I looked at the whole sphere. I first went into the agriculture space, right, the complete opposite of technology. And I was looking at social impact work. I then looked at social impact consulting from the likes of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, etc. And during this 4-month journey, I figured that, okay, what is it I don't want? What is it I don't suit to? I did an internship in a dairy company, and it overall made me even clearer and clearer on what I personally feel more as longer term aligned to my goals. And I'll share about my goals in a bit, but this allowed me to come upon product management. And when I found this role, it seemed to connect all the strengths and all the things that I wanted to from a role perspective, because of the journey, because of the background that I've had. And I felt that uh, so that's what made me decide my goals when choosing product management. One, I wanted to spend 5 years in this role as a career. Reason for that, because I felt, one, I'll be able to have the maximum impact if I spend at least 5 years, given that I'll reach a senior role. Doesn't matter from a designation, but in terms of really understanding the industry and making an impact. And one, secondly, because of spending 5 years in the role, I'll personally learn a lot. I'll personally become an expert. I'll personally there are great advantages of being a PM, such as great communication, great business handler, etc. So for me, that was number one goal, or an output that I wanted to achieve. Second was, how can I be a better tech entrepreneur, which is something that I've always, given my family business background, etc. I've always wanted to and had the ideas of running a business, but I always also wanted to upscale or had other limitations. So I felt, having discovered the wealth of things that a PM does, depending on the industry, I felt there's no better role to equip me as a tech entrepreneur was compared to a software product manager. And third is that my goal was to have the career flexibility in the job career ladder, right? So if I stay for 5 years as a PM, I'll be able to choose tomorrow becoming a CEO or becoming a VP VP for sales, or becoming a VP for customer success, right? That entire gamut of roles becomes available as I've proven my credibility as a PM. It's more easily done as a credible PM versus in other roles. Not that it's not possible. So that were my three very clear goals, and I was very excited to pursue that for that reason. But that is what made me struggle, I struggled because I was using one, I was not qualified at all on paper, right? I was coming from B2B sales, etc. I had no PM experience. I was zero qualified on paper. I had no MBA and all of those things. I had no engineering degree as well, no coding knowledge, right? Second, it was intimidating as well, because everyone else around me, especially in the Indian market, seemed to suggest that, Atin, it's impossible, right? And what made it thirdly more difficult for me as a struggle was my criteria were really high. Because I've been with great software companies in the B2B space for the 7 years before, I was very particular which company I work for, what problem is it solving, which manager I work for, and all those things, right? Um, so plus the interviewer skill set as an interviewee for myself, I felt I could not present myself as a natural, authentic person. And I would get again intimidated by the interviewer. So that was again a weakness, and that led to my fourth biggest struggle in this transition. So having said this, I want to spend the next 10 minutes quickly on what advices I had for all of y'all if we were to do these sessions together, and starting with deciding on the product management journey, right? And I think the best way to decide on this as a career is to either do a project on software related project, which is a digital product. Either do it within your existing job or your company, or do it as an external side project or a hobby that you're doing alone or with someone else, right? So run that and see where it goes, do the required research and the shipping of it, launch it, see where it goes. Or you do an internship with a company, with another company that you feel would give you the right learnings, right? Both of these, though, if you choose it to decide to learn the product management role better, should not give you the opposite bias. They both should be chosen such that they would give you the right information versus, for example, it being a bad manager who makes you think that the role is just bad, right? So that's an objective call that you need to make. Related to that, on deciding a PM, having some peers who you could speak to about how they go about their roles, and different applications, different industries would help, and different mentors as well. So I'm just spending a couple seconds more on this because it's the most important part, because many people like us who might chase product management because it's more hyped up might then regret it because it's not what we thought it was. So the peers are the ones who would be 2 years above you or the same level as you or the same background as you. Mentors typically might be the ones who are 5 years or 10 years above you in your ideal career ladder. Both of them I feel are equally important because both will give required inputs that the other set may not give. So that leads me to talking about how do you approach, if you've decided product management now, how do you approach to learning this well, right? And that's where, for me, I was in the second cohort of pragmatic leaders, and I was very strong in the business skill set, but lacked in the design and the technology skill set, which is where the course helped me to become confident personally that, hey, this is not that difficult, this overall realm of product management. Yes, there is a lot of work required and intuition required, but mainly it made me bring confidence, especially that led to better interviews, etc. Right? So the approach to learning well, there are more things to cover and as we do further sessions, but the learning mindset, the learning discipline, um, is super duper important, because especially if there are different biases that you've already come with due to people's previous backgrounds, right? But what other factors might lead to learning well is a lot of soft skills as well, um, because product management is a lot about the softer skills versus the hard skills that uh, like like on the actual execution piece that get talked about. So right, so the other factors to learning well are how you judge yourself on communication, on leadership, on team synergies, etc. So so those are factors that will also help. And then I'll finally come into what's the strategy to transition, right? What's that plan of action that can help in the most actionable way for this? So number one would be, and I've done this twice, guys. Once when shifting from uh, the B2B SaaS company to Hotstar, and then from Hotstar had a 3-month job searching break again to shift to a senior PM role. Now, so number one is what I started with. I had this um, uh, very rigorous Excel sheet which showed me a portfolio of options, which means that, hey, what is my target industries and target roles that I want, but also within these target plan A option, what is the plan B, right? If plan A doesn't work out within product management itself, within my target goals that I want to get to, what's that plan B? So uh, those are the portfolio of options which I've also got an Excel sheets ready on, which I can share with you all for free as we continue. And and the way to make that portfolio of options uh, is also something that needs a lot of thought and thought behind it, on understanding the reality in the market first, and understanding where do you stand in that market, what are your strengths, what can you bring, and where is the likelihood of getting a match, right? So that's why this is the main starting point after you've decided to go for this journey and you've learned everything about being a product manager. The second step to transition successfully is connecting, right? Connecting, especially in the Indian startup space, especially for people who are very growth driven and who want a long career or a fruitful career, for fruitful first 2-3 years, sorry, at least, getting very quality time as a product manager in terms of the environment you have, in terms of the problems you're solving, etc. So there's two parts to this. One is that if you're younger, if you're sort of more risk taking, you can still, I would say, like you can take a role at any level across any company, as long as you feel that that's something that you can deep dive in and spend time. But the second part to this is that that if you already if you're not that risk taking, then you really need the help of connecting with the right people at the right time. And that's where networking and reaching out and having cold mails, and just knowing how to present yourself and your story, and because everyone is really willing to help, right? The reason, by the way, I started working at Hotstar is because my boss and the common friend between my boss and myself, we were introduced at a coffee shop in Indranagar, and that led to immediately him wanting to take a bet on me. He just looked at my CV for 50 seconds and he decided that, okay, let's go for this, right? There was barely an interview, and but it led to him obviously he had a lot of reference checks from my previous background, right? And that's where he found credibility. So uh, so that's where reaching out and talking to the right people can really help. And the third part to the transition is application journey, the interviews, etc. itself, which can be again very intimidating, and a lot of resources online can make you feel it's just the toughest thing ever. And so the 2 cents I'd have to share there for this call is that is that practice and practice helps a lot. It especially helps your confidence. But having said that, interviews are a bit random, right? Because they come down to the bias of the interviewer, especially because every product manager is different. It's not very objectively decided. So hence, which is where a lot of preparation, a lot of having different bets, having different things that you can play around with can help a lot and goes a long way. And but those will work out, right? And that's where deciding what strengths you have and putting those across. So basically, the short point there is you have to make the interview work in your favor. If you let it be at the interviewer's hand, you may lose it, right? If you don't answer everything as per his expectation. So you have to, as much as possible, lead the interview versus it being led. The fourth step to transition properly in this career is sharing your story really properly, right? How do you craft your own story, and what credibility do you show across your strengths and your background, right? Especially if you've never done a pseudo PM role, all the more your story becomes very, very important. Like it did for me, I had to share how I did relevant things in B2B SaaS. What metrics did I improve in that space? And because I was still applying for B2C companies, I had to craft a story from what consumer sort of impact did I have in those areas. So that becomes super critical. And finally is, okay, you've got 3 offers in hand. Now, each of these 3 offers, in fact, a good example here is I went with my 3 offers in hand. I flew to Delhi because I had another interview there, and I met Talvinder in person at a coffee shop in a mall, and I presented him these on a paper, and I told him that, what do you think? Like, this is where my confusion is. This is the pros and cons of this option. This is the pros and cons of this option. And he was like, it was equally confusing for him because he knew my goals. And so that's where, again, coming back to your goals and your own future clarity and your own self-awareness, a lot of your next 5-year journey in this role is going to be decided, like it's going to be influenced at least by your first 2 years, which is where choosing the right option amongst several options you have. Some might have some sacrifices, some might have some designation, whatever. There might be different things, and I'm almost running on short of time, but finally choosing your options again is where mentors really help. For me, like Talvinder helped, really knowing you're in this for the long run, right? If you're taking it for the short run is where you might go after the money, you might go after the designations, etc. So which is why for me, Hotstar, I entered at the lowest level. Despite 7 years experience, I entered at the lowest level and then worked my way up, right? And that helped me massively because, and I missed giving this part in the beginning, that today my career growth post PM has been that I became a senior PM at the Khata Book or the Udan of Vietnam, which is one of the world's fastest growing markets. And I today am running my own business in Goa. It's a manufacturing business of multi-million revenue where, but I also but while that's in the manufacturing space, I also have the clarity and confidence that I want to do something in the software space as a business owner, specifically into micro SaaS. And that's where I've identified ideas and I'm working those on the side, right? And this would not have been possible without the last 2 years in product management at the most high stakes environment where, for example, like Hotstar, where we were really challenging ourselves, or at my last company, Telio, where we were against some big challenges in terms of the market never having such a product, right? So we were doing things completely fresh. So that sums up my the way I would take the sessions ahead with anyone interested from here, so that the transition to product management can be as less chaotic and as less stressful and as less self-doubting yourself that I had, because all of that is just white noise. It's genuinely white noise, and sports people say this all the time, that you have to clear this noise because that's what it is, and you just put your head down and focus on getting that dream result that you want. For me, I would never imagined Hotstar, and it worked out, right? because those manifestations will keep coming. So my last pointer is that as we reach 8:40, is that I will send my profile link, LinkedIn link on the message here. And anyone interested to go ahead with these sessions, please DM me and I'll share details. And I think, yeah, Piyush, let me know if any coordination there.
Atin, that was an elaborate session. Even in 20 minutes, you squeezed in so much of information. And the key takeaways, and I'm going to try going back in reverse with what you've given out, right?
Yeah.
Is the goal setting in the first place in a candidate's mind, the career goal or the career path to be very important in their mind, and followed that by preparation and getting help to prepare and preparing themselves, leading into like building a network. And without a right network, product management becomes a literally impossible task. And figuring it out with your peers and getting that peer learning and experience, and above all, getting that mentorship that you need to go into product management. And that's a brilliant strategy. I hope I went through all the points that you mentioned.
You did. You really made me happy by covering it so well. But I wonder though, was I too fast in speaking? Was that all right?
You were great. I think that brings me to something. We forgot to run the poll after I spoke in the beginning. Right. So what we're going to do is run a quick poll I'll ask Piyush to run a quick poll for the session, or rather this part that I took, and followed by the part that you took. And we'll let you know then how it was.
Sure. Wonderful. I hope this helped. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your time, Atin. Guys, some motivation for the speakers here who just finished and who are still coming on by turning on your cameras. I mean, we'd like to see faces. And I think you would agree, in this time, difficult times, the least social that we can get is by seeing those faces. I'm loving those cameras coming on. Come on, guys, let's have that. Thanks again, Atin. I'd like to call on Piyush. You can run the poll while I'm speaking. Yeah.
Just give me a minute.
Yeah, you can run it whenever you're ready. In the meantime, I'm going to ask another magical speaker with very strong experience, Amit Kapoor. Amit, are you?
Hey, hi guys. Hi Kevin. Hi.
Hi. So, yeah, Amit's right here. Great. So, Amit, I'm going to give the dice to you in a bit to run your magical session. And just before that, I would like Piyush to run the polls. If you're okay, good to go, Piyush, or you want some time and we can do it after Amit?
So actually, I think there is some technical issue. I'm not able to start this poll.
No problem. So what we'll do is we'll hand over to Amit, and Amit, you can take it over from here.
Okay. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. First and foremost, I must say I'm super impressed. I am only doing this session because when Talvinder spoke to me, he said it's at 8 o'clock in the night on Friday. I said, who the hell comes at 8 o'clock in the night? And he said, no, there will be people. I thought he was pulling a fast one. And I must say, I'm super impressed to see that like around 130 odd people who have logged in. So first and foremost, I think take a pat on your back. It's the first step towards you guys walking to the right journey. Because if somebody's taking time out on a Friday night to kind of spend on his own, investing his time on building his career, full respect to him. For me, why I do it, I just love the young energy. A quick background, I'm sure you guys would have seen, I'm available on LinkedIn, most of the places on Twitter and all. My name is Amit Kapoor. I've spent some time working in startup. I have studied at INSEAD. My first startup was AirPay. I sold that company in 2019 and I started working on a new company called OneStack. And yeah, product, tech, business, everything excites me, right? So when two things motivates me, one, talking to young energy, young individuals. So would love to hear your views. I have put together a small slide so that you can get a perspective of what I'm talking about. And I think you guys can see it now, right?
Clearly, thanks.
Okay, so everyone, fundamentally, there is only three things in life if you want to work in a startup ecosystem or any of your product management ecosystem. That's number one. Build, scale, repeat. That's it. There is no other secret mantra, and that's what keeps me going. So if you ask, right, most people come to me and says, how do startups come? It's very simple, right? Every startup begins with an idea. And then the follow-up question is that where do these ideas come from? Obviously, we've all been given this lovely old anecdotes, right? Thomas Edison and the light bulb had an idea, Isaac Newton and an apple had an idea, or the famous Archimedes and Eureka, correct? If you notice, actually most historians believe that Eureka stories are made up. And I kind of believe in it, right? Imagine otherwise somebody today talking about water displacement and that entire physics. Nobody remembers it. But the minute you talk Archimedes and bathtub, bingo, we've got it, right?
Years. And that's what made the difference, right? And by the way, Edison didn't invent the light bulb, but he built an affordable filament which actually made the light bulb. So what are we talking about? I think everything is a remix, right? Whether it be your old songs, your old movies, or old companies.
Amit, I think Amit's having some bandwidth issue.
Right.
Just going to wait a moment for him. I think he dropped off from the call.
Sure. So meanwhile he joins, we can run the poll till then.
Oh, yes, please. Let's do that. So this is the first one up. Okay. Oh, even I get to choose. I wonder what I'll choose. So
Hey, sorry, I don't know. I got thrown off.
Yeah, you're back. So while you were gone, we were just running the polls.
I think that was the first poll answer. Throw Amit out. So admin did a damn good job, I must say.
I hope it wasn't Piyush doing that just to run his polls because he didn't run it earlier.
He was like an instant, like, yeah, done, bro.
Piyush, you can run the second one as well, and we'll then go to Amit back.
Sure. I've started. Let me know if you can see.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah. So yeah, Amit, back to you.
Okay. So you guys can see my screen. So
Yes,
yeah, whenever we have this problem, right, when people have startup ideas and when we have ideas, yes. 1 second. Yeah, little later. That's my dog. Number one, tell a lot of people about your ideas. You know, I see too many people that they're afraid to talk about their ideas, and I don't know why. Two, don't keep your ideas a secret, whether in your entrepreneurial or any product or any design innovation which you're doing and you have an idea. Don't keep it a secret. Because why we believe is if someone could just beat you on your idea just by hearing it, it wasn't a defensible idea enough. And that's what we strongly believe in the startup ecosystem. Just explaining your ideas loud will actually reveal some new set of ideas because you may start with a journey that I think the answer to this sum is A, B, Y. And suddenly when you will discuss it with people, you'll realize that actually it's not B, X, Z is a much better probability answer. And you know what is very interesting is even if the other person isn't an expert in that domain, this is very, very important. A lot of time when we have an idea or we have a thought, we typically believe that if we discuss it with the domain expert or the product expert, only those people will be able to give you valuable feedback. Take this from me with a bucket of salt. If you ever have an idea and go talk to somebody not from that domain, chances are she will give you much better insights and much better candor feedback because she doesn't have a lens. He's not jaded because he's looking at it from a very different, fresh perspective. So it's very, very important. Two, choose an idea which you're really passionate about, correct? Because life's too short to be building it for somebody else. And this is what is my belief as well. I'm sure you guys today are starting your first journey towards going into product management. Tomorrow, you might want to build your own company, your own startups, and anything, right? So whatever you do, just make sure that you guys are passionate about it, yeah? Because, and this is what happens because when you are not passionate about, many businesses say that they're customer first, but what will eventually happen is they'll really become customers eventually, because while building the product, building the life cycle, it will all take it to another level. When you have an idea, don't put any filters. Don't judge your ideas. Just write down. And when you write down your idea, also remember to write down the problems and the questions which will arise with the idea. Because what is going to happen is tomorrow when you're going to discuss this idea, whether it be about a product feature or a product installation, or just creating a new user journey, people are going to poke holes in it, right? So please ensure you write the problems and you also write the questions which you think can be associated with it. And lastly, this is my humble request. You guys are going to become product managers eventually in large organizations. Build something what people really want, okay? Because this is the other thing, right? Most of us just build things which we believe that people want, but that's not really the case. Now I'm going to get to the crux of it. You know, when all product people and business people talk about, right, it's all fine to make a market out of a persona. But remember, the relationship is actually with the person. So when you guys are categorizing everything into a persona, remember it's a personality, it's an individual which he, she is behind it. And why I say this? Because life happens on the phone, not just between Monday and Friday, 9 to 5, leaving bank holidays. Actually, the life and the interaction with the customers will happen how they want, when they want, and where they want. So you may assume that you have designed something or built something which will behave in a certain fashion. Trust you me, the day it leaves your cure, the day the shot is made, it's left out and it's the consumers who will define where and what is the journey going to be. So customers don't really care about how you have crafted these magical buyer's journey, right? We are all very obsessed with it, right? Let me tell you, this is exactly how they see it. Thank you for your interest. Let me take you through this upcoming customer journey. With all these possible, and the customer standing right there instantaneously knows that this is a messed up product. I'm not going to walk the walk. I'm not going to jump the hoops, and I can see the barbed wires and everything, right? So we're just going to miss it and say, thank you very much. Because most of the time, what happens is when we're designing something, we make our process customer's problem. If you are building anything in the edtech, in the fintech, in the retail, don't let it harpen your processes to the consumers, because he's just going to give you one chance or two chances max. Otherwise, it's just going to leave you, right? This is something very, very critical. Customers shouldn't have to repeat their entire history every time they interact with you. This is my biggest frustration. I work with brands, I work with banks, I work with fintech companies, and every time I come back, they will want everything possible under the sun. I'm like, might as well take my blood group and everything, right? What else do you want? Things which you can intuitively pick up from the customer, which she has entered in the past, make it easy for her or her to go through this process and not an hindrance. Just because your process manager feels that he or she should enter it right, because he may have entered the name wrong the first time. God help it. When you're building anything, be transparent, be hot, be honest, be open, be transparent, because it's very important. When we are dealing with consumers, that's flesh and skin and hard blood, right? Warm blood, right? When we are consumers and when we experience something bad in the ecosystem, we are pissed mad and like, what is he trying to trick us? Doesn't he know we are here, we are smart? So are your consumers. This is another one very, very interesting. You know what? Most consumers, this is what they believe. I don't mind paying, but I do mind being played. I think take a pause here and understand this statement, correct? Most consumers do not have a problem when they're buying something from you, correct? And they're okay with it, whatever they're buying, and they don't mind paying it, but they hate it when they're played, right? This is the classic thing which happens when sometimes we hop onto a Rick or a cab and we are negotiating the price, or with a retail store which we're trying to haggle it out. We all know that he's haggling us, right? She's haggling us. We don't like it, right? Just tell us the price. If I can afford it, I'll go with it, right? Because this is what it is, what the consumers believe. I am not seeking a holy grail. I just need some pricing information. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. I don't know if any of you have ever tried buying an insurance or try to buy. I come from fintech, so I can only give you financial use cases. Try buying an insurance. He will take the full data set before even giving you an offer, right? Now, you and I both know that you are just taking the customer data set so that you can sell it to other competitor brands. You're not interested in selling him. Cut to try any retail which you're trying to buy, a house or buy a car or buy anything which you want. They want the entire customer's data. God only knows where that whole customer data goes because it's useless. What is even irritating is you and I also know that most of the time the customers enter wrong data. So guess what? It's garbage in, garbage out. You've taken the data set, which is not going to be helpful to you. And what you've actually done in this process is you've actually upset a genuine customer, right? Just don't do it. Don't do it. You know, this is a classic. If you ask people what coffee they like most, right? People will say, I love dark, rich, hearty roast. But guess what? Most people actually like milky wheat coffee. Go to Starbucks, right? Nobody's having a flat white. Everybody's just going to Java chip frappuccino, correct? How many people are actually having an espresso shot or a macchiato? Not too many, correct? So when consumers give insight, a lot of times the projection and the projected persona or the aspirations is what they're saying because they just want to sound cool, but what they actually mean or what they really want is something else. Second, a lot of time what happens is it's just about, I want to say what is right because that's what people want to hear. If I came to the forum and said, hey, I want a milky coffee, that doesn't look nice, right? Everybody like, oh, dude, very LS, very, very low profile. And I say, no, I want a nice dark coffee. It sounds cool. So that's what consumers end up doing. But remember what he actually really wants. And let me tell you this, no successful product has ever come out with a focus group. So when you guys are going to build something, correct, and then that whole magical moment will come, let us call a focus group, let's get some people together, let's huddle it up and do it. Most of the time, the focus group people are there for the cookies and coffee, or they are your extended relatives, or they've come for the 1,000 rupee Amazon voucher, which you're going to give them at the end of the product focus group presentation, right? So you're not going to get great insight. Go to the market, go to your real audience, talk to them, engage with them. And that's the only time what you will realize is what do the real consumers want. And by the way, let me also tell you this, right? This is a nirvana moment for most product managers. An MVP, correct? Everybody's super excited. I have an MVP. An MVP is not a product. It's only a process. And it is only the start of it because this is exactly how your product journey has to look. It has to have the ups and downs, the highs and the lows, correct? And trust you me, the large portion of your life is just going to go for development and trial and error. If somebody told me that he got the product first time right, he's smoking is what we call it, some other stuff which we are not allowed to, or he's having his own Kool-Aid, which is not worth it. What you need to do is keep doing mistakes, keep doing trial and errors, get your POC right, get your proof of concept right. When you believe that that is right, that's the time you want to kind of take it to the next level of maturity and stability. Interestingly, a lot of times people believe that competition is there. A competition could be there in a product, a competition could be there in a business, or a competition could be having a feature set which you might be trying to build and you're just trying to be different, right? It's not necessary that you need to always zag when everybody is zigging. What I fundamentally believe is competition is a form of validation. So when consumers are building companies in a domain, that means there is demand. If people are building product feature sets and it is there in multiple, that means chances are people are using it. So use it as a form of competition, as a validation, not just a threat. Lastly, coming back to a far more structured approach to my entire thing, correct? What is your product building activity all about, right? Please do remember, first and foremost, you guys are going to be a rare breed, okay? If you ask in the startup ecosystem, earlier there was a time when we used to die to get a tech lead, okay? Somebody who can come and manage our tech lead. Today there's a dire need of somebody who can get a product lead, you know, and people are really appreciative if a company has a good product manager. Trust you me, his competition knows, the competitive environment knows that who is their product manager. Why? Because the expectation of a product manager is very, very different. Number one, he needs to understand the business. correct? Number two, he should have the understanding of design. Now, I don't expect him to be a creative director or somebody who can kind of play around with colors and all. No, my expectation on that is he should understand the experience part. What is the UI, UX experience part, which is far more important. Third, technology. Again, I don't expect him to be a coder, but engineering typically helps. But what I want him or her is that they should at least understand what is possible with technology, what are the limitations of the technology, and what are the capabilities of the technology. Because let me tell you what's going to happen in the real world. In the real world, when you're a product manager, you're going to think of a lovely idea, you may even get the creative right, and you're going to give it to the tech guy, and he's going to say, "Isko 2 mahine lagega." And if you don't know tech, then you'll be like, okay, if it is 2 months, you'll be surprised to know that that's a 1 week job. Hence, it is very, very important that you understand technology. You have a basic understanding of what the processes are, what engineering background and all is, so that tomorrow when somebody challenges you that it cannot be done, you can prove it that it can be done. And when somebody questions what is the timeline, you have a very structured answer. So yeah, that's what it is. Coming back to what I started off with, first, problem definition. Do your wireframing, do your prototyping, do the interface, do the architecture, do the front end dev, do the app development, do the marketing, and get the customer feedback. But understand it's a process. Rinse it and keep repeating it till you have mastered it, till you have reached some level of scale where you believe that you are acknowledged as a brand, you are acknowledged as a product, you are acknowledged as a business. So this is what I wanted to share with you guys. I'm happy to connect with anyone. I'm largely available on LinkedIn. I'm super active over there. You can hook me up, connect with me. Anything in the fintech ecosystem, happy to answer. If you have any quick questions, I can answer that as well, or run away for my beer.
Amit, that was amazing. I mean, you touched upon so many vital things, and I like to do that key visits of key things that I take away from every talk, and I think that's something very important a product manager really needs to do. Right? Any talk, any session, any discussion ever, there is always something to take away. No matter what experience you come from, no matter what background you come from, there's always that experience to take away, some takeaways from every discussion. And of course, you touched upon some of the very stringent nuances and some of the very basics also, and that's something that I loved with the presentation, especially the BTD, right, the business technology design. I mean, any PM absolutely needs to know that and understand the crux behind it, and that sort of gives them a definition to their own purpose. Also, it was something which you mentioned about the MVP. And there are so many times everybody comes and says, "Oh, my MVP is ready. I'm ready to hit the market." And you're thinking, okay, this guy doesn't understand that. Yeah, it's just a beginning. I mean, I am ready. My MVP is ready, and some of them come and say my MVP is tested, so I have a product market fit. I'm like, okay, the discussion's over, right? And that's why it's so important to actually connect with those peers, understand from those who have that background in product management, and take those learnings into building your growth career in product management. So
There are 2 questions. Shall I quickly rattle them out?
Yes, please do. Please do.
Yeah, I'm a student from MITI Design Innovation Program. What is the difference between Chief Innovation Officer and Chief Product Officer? Are they 2 separate parts? Clearly, they're 2 separate parts. Innovation can go a little more tangent because it's internal as well as external. Largely, when we look at product officers, it is always external, correct? Because what we need is somebody who can understand the pulse of the market, of the consumers, and design products for the consumers, correct? That's very important. Yes, there are in-house product managers, but relatively far more lesser in weightage. I'm being extremely candid. What I would look for is product guy who can understand what my consumers want, what does the market demand, what is the competition doing, and able to deliver something and manage this entire thing. Another question from Yutika: if a candidate is not from a background of engineering, what is the best? It's not necessary that you should have an engineering background. Yutika, let me share you my experience, right? Today I'm running fintech companies, but I'm actually an arts graduate. I can't code. I cannot read a code. And actually, before I started my first finance company, I was the vice president of an advertising agency. So I was running an ad business, a digital ad business, and then I suddenly switched over and saying that I'm going to do something in finance. Trust you me, the bankers laughed at me when I went to banks and said I want to design this product. They said, are you kidding? You don't even understand what banking is. You're not even from a bank. You don't even literally something commerce bhi nahi aata yaar. मतलब क्या करोगे? So I don't believe that having engineering, I said it's an added advantage. That if you don't have that, then what you certainly need to know is you should understand what your product is and what your market product is. And the idea is that you should understand it. Like today, when I sit with my tech leads and all, I can't see the code, but I know if he tells me 1 day or 3 days, I know he's bullshitting me. I know what is the softwares which are required. I know what is the tech which is required. So a lot of reading I have to do. So that's the same thing you will have to do, is that you have to really be sure of, to understand the difference between React Native and Ajax, to understand the difference between Android and iOS developer and what does it mean, a different schema, a different instance and all. So those things you have to know. There is no other excuse. Plus, a lot of time, what it also helps is if you know your competitors' products and background, it certainly helps as well. Okay, these questions are growing. I'm sorry, I've run out of time, or when you tell me when to stop, I'll stop and bounce.
Amit, you can take one more. Let's do one of those, right? Either how do we build a tech aspect needed for a PM, or the transition from management consulting to product management?
Oh, management consultants to products. Okay, can I end it with a joke? No offense.
Feel free, please.
Those who can build, those who can't teach, and those who can't do either become consultants. So thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. Continue your day. Okay.
Thanks, Amit. Thank you for
You
your
guys can hook me up on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to address anything. Ciao. See ya. Bye.
Yeah. Have a good evening. And guys, keep your questions coming. Piyush, while you can run one more poll again, the rest, please keep your comments or other questions coming in. We're not letting them just go. We're keeping track of those questions, and we will take it towards the end of the Q&A session. And there's another poll. So here I'd like to, continue our journey by getting insights about customer journey. And for that, I would like to call on Rahul Jain. Rahul,
Hey,
how are you doing?
Hey, Kevin, how are you? Good evening.
Very good, buddy. So yeah, over to you, Rahul. Let's hit it from here.
Thank you, Kevin, and good evening, everyone. So my name is Rahul. Just a quick introduction. So I've been fortunate to be in the tech world for last 9 odd years. Had a very, very interesting journey, worked with B2C companies. And for the last about 6.5 years, I've been associated with a B2B SaaS company. And boy, this has been a wonderful experience for me. So when I started with Wingify, which is known for its flagship SaaS product called VW, an A/B testing product, I did not know anything about software world. I did not know anything about B2B world. All I knew was funding. All I knew was acquiring customers and running B2C business. But it has been an incredible ride for me. And over the years, I've built multiple products, 0 to 1, scaled them, and finally ended up leading the product team there. And last year, around somewhere around in March, I decided it's time to just give back and share my learnings with all of the aspiring product managers. And that's when I got associated with Pragmatic Leaders. And I think they're doing a wonderful job at helping so many of us learn a lot of things and transition into a product role. So been a wonderful journey. And I hope this session is useful for you. A lot of great talks. Last session was amazing. And let me quickly share my screen, and I'll try to make it informative. Plus, just bear with me for next 20 minutes. Let me know when you can see my screen. Just a second. Okay, just a second, guys. I'm not able to share my screen. Okay, just hold on. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Okay, so the topic that I'm going to talk about is how to think about customer journey. And if you notice that I've highlighted customer here, so I think, whenever you talk about customer journey, the most important thing is customers, right? And so, just read the slide and, take a moment to sink this information in, right? I know, this might sound odd to a lot of you, but just read it with me. Like, it says that thinking from, customer perspective does not mean that you're building a product for yourself, right? I mean, we all of us, all the time hear that, we should step into customer shoes and then think about building a product. But, there's a thin line between, stepping into customer shoes and, being a customer yourself, right? I made this mistake. Whenever I used to build products, I used to think that, hey, whether I like this product or not, whether I am a right user for this product or not. But hey, you're probably not the right user for your own product, or you probably be just one of the right users for your product, and you might have different sort of users for your products. So I think, when we talk about the term personas, I think personas is all about, finding out, who are the right customers for your product and building a product that solves a problem for them and not for yourself. So, this is probably the most important information that I can give you today. And trust me, all of us go through this journey where, in spite of us learning so much about personas, learning so much about customer journey, we all end up, having a lot of biases, in terms of building a product that suits our needs and not our customer needs, right? So very important step whenever you're thinking about customer journey, keep yourself on the side, be unbiased, and think very broadly as to who's the right customer for your product. Now, when you think about customer journey, when you try to identify your right customers, I think the most important thing is first understanding who they are, right? And now, in terms of understanding who they are, you can think about let's say it's a 30-year-old individual, who's an office going person. And what are their main goals, right? What are they trying to achieve? What is the core job for which they are hiring your product, right? And then what are the sort of main barriers of achieving those goals, right? So these are the most important or critical steps in really understanding who you're building it for, what are their goals, and then what are the barriers for them to achieving that goals. And that is where you want to hit, and that is where you want to really build a product that solves their problem, that helps them achieve their goals. Now, a very interesting way of thinking about customer journey is understanding customer journey map. And now I'm sure you all have heard about this term, you all have read about it. But it's not just something that happens in theory, right? So all of us being product managers, we do it on a day-to-day basis. And the easiest way to do that is, once you sort of, first step would be to really understand what are the different sort of behavioral stages, of your right persona, and then aligning the customer goals for each stage, and then sort of plotting like a touch point, like what are the different touch points with which your customer interacts with your product or interacts with your business, right? And then for every one of the touch points, you identify the pain points and then finally come up with a solution. Now, if you look at the entire process, right, the solution is the last part, right? So again, we as product managers or as general individuals, right, we're always biased towards, thinking about jumping to solutions or thinking about problems that align with us, goals that, we feel are important, but that's not true, right? You only spend like about, 20 or 30% of your time on working on solutions. The rest of the time goes into identifying what is the journey of different personas that you have. What are the different stages in which they interact with your product, and at every stage identifying those particular pain points. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share like an actual example of how I did it once. I'm going to share like an Excel with you, and just to show you guys that this is not just theoretical. It really works for you as a product manager. Just give me a second. Okay, so I hope you guys can see the Excel sheet that I'm sharing right now. And so let's take a hypothetical example, right, for a software product. And I've taken a hypothetical persona. Let's call him John Doe, whose title is a chief marketing officer who works for a company called ABC.com. And he is a decision maker. He works for a small company with 100 employees, and he's leading a team of about 15 people. And when you talk about his background, it's very, very important part, right? So he was previously working with a mid-sized e-commerce company where he was heading the SEO division for marketing. He's now joined ABC.com, which is also an e-commerce company who has been recently funded, and he's looking to expand. Now, if we talk about his challenges, now John needs to scale the marketing team and tech stack. He wants to adopt all modern marketing technologies and strategies. He's looking for a solution to help him in digital marketing, specifically on the personalization side, but he has limited knowledge. Now, these little tips and bits are very, very critical. And trust me, this is what decides, what product you're going to build. And this will really help you identify the customer journey as well. And I'm giving you an actual example of me working on a product, and we are trying to identify the right personas for our A/B testing product, and then sort of understanding what are the different pain points and different goals that we can help them with. So if you look at this customer journey map, there are different stages on the top. One is the awareness stage, second is consideration, third is decision stage, and fourth is retention. Now, typically, if you take any example, right, be it, let's say an e-commerce example or software example, a typical customer would go through different stages. First is awareness, right? This is where, typically a customer would start doing some research, trying to understand, let's say if you want to buy a product, they would start to search for that product. They would start to read reviews. They would start to understand, like, hey, what is the best product for us? Once they've done that, the second stage is consideration. Now they have 10 options, and then they want to decide, which option is best for me. The third sort of stage is the decision making stage. Now they've done the analysis. They know that, hey, out of the 10 sort of solutions that are available to me, this one is probably the best for me. And finally, once they buy your product, the last stage is the retention stage. This is where, you want to retain the customer. This is where they'll try to find if they got the right ROI. So for example, if I'm buying a product from Amazon, right, I would look at a lot of things. I would look at their service. I would look at their delivery times. And if I'm happy, I'll probably buy the product again, right? And that is a similar case with any product out there, right? So these are the important sort of stages. And then you see that, there are sort of, a customer is just a visitor to you because, they're just searching and they're trying to do some research. Once they have considered your product as one of the options, they become a lead for you. And then finally, when they've made a decision and then when you want to retain them, that's when they become a customer. Now, if you look at the first column here, we've mentioned that, what are the different user goals at every stage? What are the touch points? What are the pain points? And what are the ideas, right? So, this is how simple it is, but, it's super effective. And this actually, helps you do a very, very detailed understanding of the customer journey. You don't have your biases, every single touch point. You're trying to identify pain points. So your solution will always become very, very, detailed, right? So let's say, John, who's our persona, which we considered, at the awareness stage, John is just trying to educate himself to learn more about personalization, how companies adopt personalization strategies. He's not looking for a vendor at this stage, right? And probably what he'll do is he'll read blogs, he'll read case studies, and these are your touch points. And during this sort of journey, or during this stage of the customer journey, his pain points are finding the right content to learn about the space and finding success stories from peer companies, right? Now, in the next stage, at this point, John understands how he can scale personalization strategies and is now ready to understand more about the tools that can sort of help him, scale the solution. Now, this is where, he would start looking at your website. He would start looking at the product pages. He would start reading about the reviews of your product. And at this stage, his pain point is that, hey, I have too many options of vendors to choose from. what is the best way of finding the best fit for my business, right? What is the right fit for my business? Now, at the decision making stage, at this point, John has evaluated multiple vendors and shortlisted the final solution. He now wants to take a call and see, which tool is sort of best for this team. Now, what he would do is he'll probably take a free trial of the product. He would go through pricing page. He would talk to sales, right? At this point in time, he's thinking about budgets. He's thinking about the evaluation process. And finally, when he becomes your customer and he's using your product, that is where, he wants to make sure that he's getting the right ROI from the product, right? Which is where, he would look at ROI reports. He would, talk to your support teams, right? And at this stage, his pain point is that, is my team making the most out of the solution? Are we getting the right ROI from the product? So once you look at the entire thing, that's when you sort of understand, hey, now I know the end-to-end journey of this persona. I know that what are the different touch points. I know his pain points. And now using all that information, I'll build a relevant sort of solution, right? Now, if I was not doing any of this, right, I'll probably miss out on any one of the stages, or I'll probably not sort of, understand that what are the pain points from a previous stage. Right? So which is why, it's very, very important to sort of, map out your entire customer journey, understand the goals at every stage, and then work through a solution. Right? And this journey can be completely different for different personas. If, for instance, my persona was not a CMO who's a decision maker, or my persona was, let's say, a digital marketer, right, who's probably a user, but he's not a decision maker, right? Then this map would look completely different, right? So, again, give you an example, right? So typically, like for the product that I worked on, our core personas were marketers and product managers, because these were the people who were doing A/B testing. But suddenly, we built a product which was around server-side A/B testing. And then our personas entirely shifted to developers, right? And now when you talk about developers, none of this is true, right? Our entire customer journey changes. They don't care about having like a fancy product that has a wonderful UX, right? Product managers might care for that. But developers, what do they care about? They care about APIs. They care about the flexibility of your product to sort of integrate with their ecosystem, right? So that completely changes. So which is why identifying the right users, and then, for every set of personas that you have, finding the job for which they're hiring you, drawing out this customer journey, that is how you go about, thinking of customer journey, and not doing something in isolation. And especially, just want to reiterate before I end this session that you are not your own customer, right? You might be one of the customers, but don't bias yourself. You might draw all of these things. You might, even, map out your personas. But at the end, our biases force us to sort of, build a solution, that is solving our own problems and not the customer's problem, right? So, this is my biggest takeaway. And, this has been my biggest learning. When I started out as a product manager, I was doing all of these things, right? I have learned everything, from books, right? But at the end, my biases really pushed me to build a product that was, to my own sort of, because for example, me as a user, I felt that UX has to be amazing, right? It has to be super friendly. But, very late in the stage that I realized that probably for certain set of users, UX is not that important, and probably, making a more flexible product is more important, right? So yeah, I mean, this was like a quick session from me. I know there's a lot of things around personas, around customer journey. Happy to have any questions. You can reach out to me offline as well. But yeah, a small session, a quick takeaway from me. Don't bias yourself. That's it. Thank you.
Rahul, that was again so beautifully squeezed in that short duration. I think a true meaning of masterclass.
Yeah.
On somebody who just comes in blank without knowing what is supposed to be a persona, what is a consumer journey or a customer journey, and how do you approach it. And you beautifully did it in 20 minutes. I mean,
Thank you.
kudos to that. Yeah. We've had some question on, will you be sharing that?
I can certainly share that. No worries.
So I would rather leave a hook here, that if they want you to share it, please come on to our platform and ask for it, and you'll be available
Absolutely.
on the platform to help them with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, I've been associated with Pragmatic for a year, and probably the only reason why I'm associated for such a long time is because I know that they're doing a wonderful job, right?
Absolutely.
And like I couldn't agree more that this is the absolutely the right platform if you want to really get into learning product management basics. And trust me, like I'm that kind of person who's always against theoretical knowledge. And one thing that I've seen with the structure at which Pragmatic teaches people is totally practical, helping, they got mentors on board who can help people with their real life experiences, right? So yeah.
And that's the true definition of a mentor, right? I mean, somebody
Yeah.
who can bring their real life experiences, and
Yep.
as you spoke about those biases, does
Yeah.
not bias the wants and needs of the mentee
Yes.
with their own, right? And then can sort of groom them into the right direction.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, thanks, Rahul, once again.
Thank you, Kevin.
Definitely keep in touch on that.
Yes.
And to the audience, come on, show some support. I mean, I was going to say show some love, but support to Rahul. Turn on your cameras at least. Let the speakers see some reaction, right? Your questions can keep coming into the chat. Piyush, I would request you to run the poll once again. And Rahul, thank you one more time.
Thank you, Kevin.
Here
Thank
now we're going to move into a very, very important topic that is ultimate goal of a product manager, right? I mean, the whole reason you get into product management is uh, to sort of grow, to crack that interview and get that job and continue on with your career. And uh, no one better than Sonupam here, who's with us. Sonupam, welcome, and I'd like to give you the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Really excited to be here and for the opportunity to be able to interact with you all virtually, right? So far, I think there have been very good sessions, and I've truly learned from all the speakers. So really high benchmarks for me here. So I really hope I can do justice to all of that. Just a quick introduction for myself. So I do have about 10 years of professional work experience. Bulk of that is, working with American Express as a senior product manager. Here, essentially, I worked on scaling a lot of mature products, but also conceptualizing and launching new product lines and taking it globally. And very recently actually shifted jobs, and currently I work with Walmart Labs, which is the Fortune 1 company in the world. And so not very long ago I was in all of your shoes, preparing for interviews and giving interviews. So when the opportunity landed itself, to present on how to ace the product management interview in this forum, I totally grabbed it. And what I'm really hoping for is that, I would be sharing a lot of my personal experiences through the interviewing journey. And I really hope that, you can put up a few advices or a few tips here and there, which you guys can benefit from and also leverage them in your interview preparation as well as in the final interviews, right? So looking forward to that. What I've also done is prepare like a brief deck, right? So that I can navigate through all the pointers with you guys. So just give me one quick moment for me to be able to share it. And Kevin, I will look to you to confirm, whether it's visible or not.
Can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. So I think first and foremost, what I wanted to do was, to set up the stage and basically talk about the various kinds of skill sets that you may be likely to be interviewed upon, right? So I divided into 4 key buckets, right? So problem solving, analytical ability, a lot of situational or behavioral questions, and technical depth, right? Now we will be going into each one of these in detail in the next few minutes. So first, let's start with problem solving, right? So typically in your initial part of the interviews, you could be asked, questions around, one typical question is to say that, pick your favorite product, or rather pick your favorite app and tell me how would you really improve it, right? Now here the interviewer may actually give you the name of the app, let's say LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or they may leave it up to the interviewer to pick up one app and then, work around it. Another variation of this question would be where the interviewer could give you like a hardware product, right? So say something like, which lies in the domain of product design, to say that, why don't you design an alarm clock for the blind, or, refrigerator for kids, right? So these could be certain typical questions, in this domain. Now, as you would notice, a lot of these questions are fairly open-ended, right? So what would truly help you here is to have a toolkit which you can leverage to be able to provide certain structure for the articulation of your response to this question, right? So here I've tried to cover broad categories. Ideally, in your problem solving interview, you should touch upon all of these aspects and build your answers around it, right? Now, let me take an example and walk you through it. I feel that ways it will become easier for me to speak about each of the pointers, and it will also give you guys a feel as to how to approach it. So in fact, in one of my recent interviews, I was asked that, how would you go about improving LinkedIn app? Right. Now, here the first step for me would be to ask a lot of clarifying questions, right? Convert this open-ended, vague statement and provide it more structure, right? So when I think about certain clarifying questions, the first thing that came to my mind is, what are we really trying to solve for here, right? And typically you could bucket this into three categories, right? So is it that we're trying to drive higher acquisitions? Are we looking for higher user engagement? Or does it have to do with retention? Right. So these could be certain ideas that you can throw out to your interviewer and then work with your interviewer to, define the scope of the problem. Let's say your interviewer says that, I'm looking for higher user engagement. In that case, another helpful thing is to, at that stage itself, think of a metric, that would resonate with this goal, and then use that metric in your conversations down the line to be able to assess certain solutions and also see which solutions would you really prioritize so that it moves the needle for the metric that you and your interviewer have aligned on, right? So for example, let's say if it was acquisitions, you could say, is it the number of mobile downloads? If it's engagement, you could say, are we looking to drive, more daily active users? Are we looking to drive more sessions per active user? Is it more time spent per session? It could also be, the number of monthly subscriptions, right? So these could be certain metrics that you could throw out and work with your interviewer to select one, right? Let's say that you decide to work on, number of sessions per active user, right? So your goal right now is to improve user engagement, and the metric for that is going to be number of time spent per active session by an active user, right? Another clarifying question that I would ask here at this stage is to say that, are there a certain specific set of users for which we are trying to make this improvement, right? So this could be by geography or by any demographic variables as well, right? Now, once you have been able to ask a lot of clarifying questions and identify the exact scope of the problem, the next set of step would be for you to build user personas, right? And, Rahul did touch upon a lot of these aspects. So what I'm going to do is to, spend lesser time here. But essentially, like even Rahul touched base on, you have to think of different user personas who come to this app, right? What are the various use cases for which they're using the app? And if you could, list down a few user pain points, right? And then once you have this structure in place, that's when you move into your solution, right? So the idea is to be able to really flesh out the problem itself rather than jumping onto the solution, right? So for example, in the case of LinkedIn, your user personas could be, let's say, an active job seeker, right? Who's there on the platform actively looking for jobs that would suit his or her profile, right? A second user persona in this case could be, an active recruiter who's trying to look for suitable or potential candidates to be able to fill it. Other could be, let's say a lot of passive users who are there on the portal, not necessarily actively looking for jobs, but they're on the platform for interaction and engagement, right? So these could be few set of user personas that you can walk through. And then the next key thing would be to, identify a few use cases for which you would like to solve for, right? Now, remember, you can't solve for everything in that 1 hour of interview, right? So you really have to figure out one use case or one, user persona for which you would like to suggest, improvements in this discussion, right? So for example, let's say, along with my interview, I decided that, okay, I'm going to focus on the user persona of active job seekers, right? Now here, then I'm going to throw out a few, use cases, right? That, an active job seeker comes to the portal, searching for jobs, right? So can I make enhancement to the job search engine itself, right? Second is, once they're able to land up to a job of their interest, how does the user application journey really looks like, right? The third is that, once they're able to apply, how can they see the status of the different jobs that they have applied for to really understand where is it that their application may be moving forward versus versus not moving forward, right? So these could be a few use cases that you can define in the interview, right? Pick one of these use cases and then start to think about the various solutions that you will have at hand to solve for this specific pain point, right? So for example, let's say you were to say that, the job application process today is quite tedious, or rather than tedious, I would say not so standardized. For certain jobs, you could do like a fairly simpler process on the LinkedIn app itself and upload your resume and apply it. Whereas for certain other kinds of companies and jobs, you're required to visit their, official website, create an account, and then, upload a resume and then apply, right? So this process is not standardized. And in some cases, it can be fairly time consuming as well, right? So one of the solutions or pain points that you can look at is that, can we look into a one-click apply kind of a solution for the user so that, this person is able to fairly quickly apply for the job. The second thing that you could point out is to say that, today, while you can apply for jobs on the portal, there's no way for you to actually understand at what, level is your job application in, right? Is it under consideration? Has it been rejected? Have you been shortlisted for a first round of interview, right? So can we add those features so that, the job seeker is not left second guessing to understand what's really going on with the application? But here, one thing I would like to call out, while you can suggest a lot of few changes, right? The goal here, or what will really give you the brownie pounds, it's to be able to come up with different innovative solutions, right? Which would really set you aside from rest of the crowd, right? So think of certain big problems, and with that, think of certain bigger solutions, which could really move the needle for LinkedIn and, in specific to the metric that you're looking for, right? So one example that comes to my mind is that, can you really synergize, let's say, LinkedIn Learning with the LinkedIn platform, right? And in doing so, you will be able to, have a user hooked on to both the platforms and also leverage, other sister platforms that LinkedIn has, right? So let's say, can you suggest certain LinkedIn trainings, on LinkedIn, which would help improve the chances of someone, applying for a certain job, right? So certain big scope or big level problems and solutions would really help you get a few extra brownie points and also really set you aside from, rest of the other interviewers, that this person may be meeting for finalization of this job. The seventh point that I have here is actually to consider a lot of trade-offs, right? So as product managers, you will have a lot of solutions. You could think of a lot of features, right? You could have a lot of customer inputs or a lot of inputs from business teams, etc. But how do you really, understand which are the features that you want to work in the short term versus which is what you want to review in the next quarter or in the next year, right? So for that, it would be helpful that, let's say, if you were able to shortlist a few features, right? Like the two or three that we discussed, right? For example, a one-click apply, the second one being the ability to be able to check the status, and the third one being the integration with the LinkedIn portal, right? How would you really prioritize between these solutions, right? You could speak about a few trade-offs, right? What would be the certain pros and cons of each of these solutions, right? And also link it back to the metric that we discussed upfront, right? Which in this case was more number of time spent per session, right? Which feature will really move the needle for you in terms of this metric that you're aligned on to begin with, right? So that would, correlate the entire problem and close the loop for this, problem statement that was thrown at you. Another thing which I would say, if time, permits in that discussion, a few other things that you can call out is that once you have, a certain set of features aligned, right, it would be good to understand how would you really measure the success of each of these features, right? And how will you roll it out in the market? Will you open every feature for all users? Will you first like to do a A/B testing, open it for some, not open it for some, read the results for a certain time frame, could be 4 weeks, could be 4 months. And then what is the metric on which you will assess to say whether this feature is a success for the primary objective that you had or not, right? So in doing so, you may monitor a few metrics, or you may also look into a lot of, customer feedback, right? Either through surveys or through in-app messaging, right? So capture a lot of customer feedback to really know whether customers are responding positively to this feature, or would they like this feature to be certain other way, right? And a good example of that is that how in this session, Piyush is actually also taking in, a lot of surveys and through the poll trying to assess, how good the sessions was, where is it that we can improve, right? So this is like a live example of how, people are really trying to check in whether it's really resonating with the customers or not, right? On this point, I would also call out that, it's best to actually rehearse and practice some of these sample questions on your own, right? Maybe walk this through your mentors so that you're able to get, valuable feedback and, you can really refine your answers. Another point that really helped for me was that, these days, all of the interviews are virtual, right? Sometimes it can be difficult for your interviewer to really understand what you're thinking through and how you're thinking through it, right? So it may be helpful for you to, probably share like a notepad or a deck, start noting down some of the important pointers and, speak your mind, right? So that your interview at all stages is being able to understand how you've broken down the problem and, at what stage you are right now and what is next to follow, right? So doing certain things will really help, make sure that you and your interviewer are on the same board. At this stage, one more tip that I would give is that I would also highly recommend you go through some of these common apps, right? Let's say LinkedIn, WhatsApp, and just see what are the various set of features that are there. And, as a consumer, you yourself, what features do you feel if were added would really improve the user experience, right? So having, a deep dive into some of these apps would also really help you be able to articulate your answers when you're in the interview process. With this, I would probably go on to the next set of, skill set that you are likely to get tested on, which would be around your analytical skills, right? Now, typically under this domain, people generally ask a lot of estimate questions, right? So think of questions like, how many flights fly out of the Bangalore airport in a day, right? Or think of, questions like, what is the number of washing machines that get sold in India in a year, right? So some of these estimate questions, right? Again, here having a structure will really be able to break down the problem for you and for you to be able to structurally answer this question. Now, remember here, no one really knows the correct answer, right? So don't worry too much about the right answer. Don't also worry doing, too complicated maths, because that is not the real skill that they're trying to test for. What they're really trying to test for is to see whether you're able to really break down the problem into smaller chunks and have an approach to address each of these chunks, right? So they are really trying to test you on that. Now, here again, this can be quite open-ended, right? So for example, if I were to work on, the number of flights that fly out of Bangalore in 24 hours, you could refine the scope of the statement, right? Ask a few clarifying questions to say that, what kind of flights are we really considering here? Is it like passenger flights? Is it cargo planes? Is it, individual jets? What is the real scope of the problem? Let's say your interviewer says, let's work with passenger flights. Another follow-up question could be, is it domestic, international, or both? Let's say your interviewer says, let's work on domestic flights. So great, you have been able to narrow down the scope of the problem. What you next need is a good starting point, right? From where you will start, then, slice and dice that using a few relevant variables to be able to break this problem down into smaller chunks, right? So let's say that in this case, let's say that you were to say that, in any given airport in 24 hours, you were to say that there are certain, times which are more peak times, right? Where you can assume that the airport is working on 100% capacity. Whereas there are certain times which are like non-peak hours where the airport is working in less than 100% capacity. Now here, when I say less than 100%, is it 50? Is it 20? Is it 80? That is something that you can use as an assumption, right? And just make sure that you clearly state that during the interview, right? So let's say in my case, I'm going to say peak hours is where the airport is running on 100% capacity, whereas non-peak hours is where the airport is running, let's say, at 50% capacity, right? And here, try to use numbers so that your calculations become easier, right? So which is my fifth point here, right? So even though it could actually be 40%, but I sense that doing any maths with a 50% number would be, would actually make my calculations a lot easier, right? So as long as I state that, that is good to go, right? Now, next, come on to the next point, right? So let's say I would say that my peak hours would run 1/3 of the day. So I'm assuming here that, peak hours would run 8 hours in the day, 4 hours in the morning, let's say 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., and 4 hours in the late evening to night range, let's say 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. right? And then the remaining 18 hours for me would be the non-peak hours, where I'm assuming 50% utilization rate. Now, the next thing is for me to say that in peak hours, or rather, so to say that, how much time does it really take for a plane to take off, right? So let's assume it takes around 2 minutes. I'm also going to look into, that how many runways are there, right? And let's say I assume that there could be 2 runways which are getting utilized, right? So here, then I need to start plugging in these numbers, right? So let's say how many flights will go into my peak hours. So I have 8 hours, right? And every plane takes about 2 minutes to run, right? So by that, 30 planes will be able to fly out in a year. Once I multiply it with 8, that would be around 240 planes, right? And let's say if I have 2 runways in Bangalore, that would be around 480 planes in these 8 hours, right? Now, these 480, I can safely round it up to say 500 planes, right? So like I said, the exact maths is not what they're looking for. You can at different stages, if you feel like it, you can simplify your calculations, right? So in the 8-hour peak hour window, it stands at around, 500, which basically tells me that in the non-peak hours, right, which is at 50% run rate, but is, like from 8 hours, I have right now moved to like 16 hours, right, which is double. I can then understand, how much time it will take in the non-peak hours, right? And basically then add it up to give that number to the interviewer. At the last stage, I may want to think of, certain edge conditions that may happen, right? For example, in this case, I could think of, what about, different planes which land, right? Like as interconnecting cities. So let's say the plane is supposed to go from Delhi to Trichy, but they have a landover in Bangalore, right? So how do I really accommodate for such kind of planes? So at the end, before you throw out the final answer, just take a moment to think of any edge cases that may be applicable, which then you can plug into the equation, right? So that is how you can actually approach these guesstimate questions. Again, if you could share a notepad or just keep walking through your math, at different steps, that will just make sure that your interviewer is really being able to follow what you're saying. And it becomes especially important in virtual interviews, right? Moving on to the third skill set where you may be judged on is actually a lot of situational questions, right? So remember, as a product manager, there are these certain skill sets that you're required to demonstrate day in, day out, right? So they could ask you a lot of situational questions around that, right? So for example, one of your key roles is to be able to, have good stakeholder relationships and also be able to influence your stakeholders, right? So they may want to know how effective you could be at that, and hence they may throw out a question saying that, mention a time when your business team did not agree with the feature that you were trying to prioritize, but how did you go about still convincing your partners in order to prioritize or in order to put that feature onto the roadmap? Another example could be around prioritization, right? So let's say that your tech team came back to you saying that, they don't have enough bandwidth to work on that feature, but you truly believed that this feature is really going to move the needle for you. Then how did you partner with your engineering team and, you got this feature prioritized? So certain situational questions will maybe asked. And what I really like to use is the STAR or the STAR framework, where you're able to clearly articulate the situation, the action that you took, and the result, right? So basically clearly articulate the business impact, of the final outcome, right? So this framework would really help you articulate your answer in this mechanism. The fourth thing that I want to actually touch on is around technical depth, right? So one of your key stakeholders is going to be the tech team, the engineering team. So it is extremely important for you to be able to talk their language, for you to be able to convert a feature into a technical requirement, right? And for that, just prepare, a bit, just have a basic knowledge around the tech stack, what goes into the middleware, frontware, backend, have some knowledge around that. Be aware of the SDLC methodologies, right? Typically questions around agile and agile scrum ceremonies do get asked. So make sure that you understand those. You may also want to work with your mentor, with a product manager, to truly understand how does the feature prioritization implementation really happens. And lastly, make yourself cognizant with the product management tools, right? So Jira, Confluence, just have basic understanding of these, which you can then articulate in your interviews as well, right? So I think this is all the content that I had today. So hope you guys had some learning around it. Happy to take any questions either in this forum or through LinkedIn or any other platform.
I'm quite sure they have had a lot of learnings from it. it was, I mean, I have been on both sides of the table for interviews, and I can understand how I was actually going back into those moments. And when you were talking about it, uh, uh, there are a couple of questions here, and one I think they're addressed to you. So would you like to take them in the chat?
Yeah, I could respond to them in the chat.
Right. So do you want me to ask them, or would you like to read them out?
So okay, maybe you could, because I see a lot of them. So maybe you could.
Right. So I'll just go in the order. So there's one which says from Lokendra, if the case study is related to some well-known company like YouTube, LinkedIn, etc., is it good practices to make some assumptions beforehand about the company and discard some areas of doubt for the case?
Yeah, I feel like upfront it's good to be able to speak about the offerings of YouTube, right? Various different user personas, right? And if you have to narrow down the scope of the problem, right, then clearly articulate a few assumptions, or ask a few clarifying questions for the interviewer to really know what specific area he or she really wants to deep dive into. So I feel that's perfectly fine, right? So I feel as long as you're working with your interviewer to understand the scope of the problem and make, like I said, make suitable assumptions, that is totally fine.
Sure. We have another one from Nilesh here, which says he's having 3 years work ex at TCS and currently pursuing MBA at IIM Trichy. Has PM experience for over a year through internships and part-time jobs in tech startups. Uh, Most recent being a 10-year-old tech solution startup. Well, that's a long question, buddy. Okay. So throughout this year that he's been there, he's built product in edtech, pharma, real estate, SaaS, and complete ownership of product lifecycle. Still, he doesn't feel he's good enough to nail a PM interview, particularly because he has not worked on an existing product, and all the products that he has built are from scratch. So, could you let him know what next should he do with respect to learning or interviews to complete the circle?
Yeah, I would say two things here, right? In fact, I have worked on, matured existing products, also on new products. I have generally actually seen that selling a new product which you thought from scratch, work with a lot of partners, launch the MVP into the market, scaled it up, that actually, interviews really do like to know, and they do really appreciate it, right? Because in a way, you have truly worked end to end on all aspects of the product and life cycle, right? So I don't think that that should be like a roadblock to your interview preparation or your ability to being able to crack it, right? Maybe you may want to rehearse your answers, with a mentor or with someone that who could really help you fine tune that answer, right? Maybe those could be areas where you need a little bit more guidance and help, right? The second thing that I would say is, but if you still do want to think about an existing product, a lot of time people actually start asking questions around their own products of the company, right? So you may want to research on that and say that, hypothetically speaking, if those questions were put to you, how would you answer, right? Or how would you go about having a vision for that company or for that product, right? That could be imperative. Other than that, I would say that typically these are the 4 5 areas where you get tested on, right? Really think what areas you're doing a good job at versus what are the areas where you feel you need a little bit more improvement. Pragmatic Leaders is a great platform to come and get a lot of help. Work with a few of your mentors here. You may also want to reach out to a few seniors, right? So like you do belong to I'm Trichy, and there would be a lot of pedigree of people who are already placed in PM roles in startups or in established firms. So reaching out to them, getting some help. Also run like a mock interview, right? I feel like sometimes we believe that we are doing a really good job, but the third person who's listening to it can actually provide really valuable insights. Like I did the same, right? I ran a lot of my preparation through some mentors, and I felt like I really got valuable inputs, right? So those are the few things that I would suggest.
Yep. Thanks. I think that says it very clearly. So, Sonopam, I'm going to also ask the other speakers here. Rahul is here. Atin is here. I think Amit is gone for his beer. So I'm going to ask everyone. It's open. I'm just going to ask some of the questions that came in, and anyone could choose to sort of reply. There's one specifically to Atin. Did you mean compromising the compensation when you mentioned about starting at a junior level at Hotstar?
That's right. I actually replied to him privately. Compensation and designation both, in case it helps the others. But the benefits though was that I was working with a top class VP product, Anshumani Rudra. I was working in a team that had a very autocratic style. It was a startup within the larger system of Star and Hotstar. And third, it was the problems that we were solving. So for all of those benefits, it encompassed it sort of far downweighed the cons, and it made sure that I was able to benefit with the brand name, with the problem solving applications, and yeah. So that's how I chose that.
Okay. Rahul, would you? I mean, there's this question on how do we build the tech aspect needed for a PM role?
Sure. That's a very interesting and a question that almost everybody asks. And honestly, I come from a tech background, but I always say one thing that you need to be technically literate. You don't need to be an expert coder or anything, right? So it's always helpful to sort of interact with the engineers because you work very closely with them. But it's definitely not like a requirement per se, right? And as in when you start to interact with engineers on a day-to-day basis, you get to understand how they're doing their estimations, and that sort of helps you do more interactions with them. And also, I think having like basic terminologies understood is very important. Like if you talk about APIs, right? So I believe that you don't have to work on APIs as such, but you should know what they mean, right? Because these are very, very important things for a product manager, right? You should understand like basics of infrastructure, basics of tech stack, right? And that is something that you can obviously learn. You can go online and just read about them, right? So you just have to be technically literate. You don't have to be a technologically expert person who can code, right? So that's definitely not a requirement. And I think the biggest fear that product people have is interaction with the engineers, right? Which is why they keep thinking that they won't be the right people to interact with them. But that's not the case. In every organization you have let's say you have a tech lead, you have an engineering manager that sort of works as a bridge between product and engineering teams, right? So that person can translate your requirements, that person can help you with having the right estimates for the work, right? So you can trust in them. And as and when you keep interacting with them, you sort of learn and you understand the basic terms. You understand that hey, for this kind of work, these are the estimations that people give, right? So it's not a deal breaker if you're not technically very sound, but just be very, very open about learning. Just understand important terms, and that's it. Yeah. I mean, that's how to go about it.
Very rightly said. I think, yeah. So it's not important that you know the tech, but you know how
Yeah.
to communicate about the tech, right? I mean,
Correct.
Sonupam, you've already muted yourself. There's a question here. I build internal products for an investment bank. Will my experience be counted if I'm interviewing for a B2C PM role?
Yeah, I feel all kinds of experiences do get counted. I think what you really have to do is to be able to use your experience, right, in the context of, the company that you're interviewing for, right? So certain basic skill sets would actually remain the same, whether it's B2B or B2C, right? I think the challenge here or the key here is to be able to relate your current experience with the new firm or with the new product that you are probably likely to work with, right? If they can see that you are already being able to do that in the interview, right, really understand the new company and the product, have a vision for that and be able to clearly understand a few challenges that you may face initially, given, slight difference in your work experience, I think that should be totally fine.
Right, very rightly said. Yeah. So I mean, it boils down to the approach, the mindset, and that's what they really want to test, right? At these interviews. So whether you're in B2C, B2B, it doesn't matter as much. Atin will disagree probably at some point. Okay, so I have one more question, Sonupam. I think you probably can take a jab at this one as well. And if anybody, Rahul, Atin, want to pitch into this one, how do you see transition from management consulting to product management?
Yeah, that was an interesting one, right? So to be honest, a lot of my friends have actually done it, right? So I feel that if you truly have interest in products, right, and if you truly want to, work from a customer-centric viewpoint, right, you should totally go for it. And like I said, what my experience has been is that the crux of product management interviews, are fairly simple, right? They will try to see your approach, right? How structured or logical mindset that you have, and also how you are being able to relate to the customer pain points, right? So one key goal is to have customer empathy, right? So as long as you are truly being able to relate to some of these concepts and also demonstrate that rightly so in the interview, I feel like you will be able to crack it. And I feel that also as management consultants, you already have a very, typically in your day-to-day work life, you would have had a very structured problem solving approach, and a structured way of presenting the problem statement and the various offerings or client solutions. So I feel like you already have it. You may be asked to apply it in a different domain, right, in a different context. So I think for that, a few rehearsals and practice sessions would really help you get cracking the interview.
Thanks, Sonupam.
Sorry, I didn't crack a joke, but I think
Anything to add, Atin, Rahul?
No, I think he's covered it. I would say, like from the interviews that I've also done, I think one couple of interviewers, in fact, said this, that the main thing that ends up getting lacked is customer research, user persona, and that thinking, right? Because I think consultants typically look at data more so, and they may not look at primary research or speak to users as much. So that's one key thing that they should be prepared for in these interviews.
Right. Rahul,
Yeah. So I remember a very interesting experience. I was interviewing this person from management consulting background, a very interesting background. This person was really good at problem solving, right? I mean, very very good, right? And that's a very very important aspect of product management, right? You should be good at problem solving. But one place I felt that the person lacked was finding that balance between what's right for the business and having that customer empathy, right? So he was doing all the right things which could be good for the business, right? And problem solving was great, right? But I felt that there was a certain thing that was missing was customer empathy, right? So if you can sort of manage that balance between customer empathy and what's right for that business, finding that right point, I think that's when you'll hit it. But I feel that they're obviously the right candidate to be in this role. And problem solving is definitely very very important skill required for product managers, but yeah, having that right balance is important.
right. So, yeah, I think good perspectives in there. There's somebody unmuted. Piyush, can you just look at that? Um, Yeah, so we are almost at the end of time, but then we have such a lovely audience. I mean, we're such retained audience here. I was watching that throughout, right? And we have a couple of more questions, and I think we can sort of take them if the speakers are okay with it.
Sure. We missed our last poll, so we can begin with that. And
Don't worry, that's on my mind.
okay, sure.
It will come. Yeah, you can run it simultaneously. Don't worry, you can go. Right, so yeah, that's the last poll coming up, and I'm going to ask this question, and it's again open to all the speakers. How does interview process change from PM to senior PM and director head of product roles? What kind of questions we can expect? I mean, that's a very open-ended question, but maybe some gist on the process, at the interview process between the different roles that are there.
Won't you be best suited for that, Kevin?
I would like to hear from the speakers, and I'll probably add into that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have inputs.
Okay, then I'll give a small jab at it. I didn't realize that you would put me on the spot. But yeah, the interview process is definitely different, right? At the PM level, I mean, I would say at every stage of the product journey, career journey, whether it's an APM, PM, senior PM, and then principal or head of product roles, the set of problems that you're approaching, the ambiguity that you're approaching changes. The case that is given to you could be very similar, but the answers that the interviewer would expect would be very different, right? Because they sort of put you in that basket. There are a few companies who rather do not tell you what position they are interviewing you for, and they would, based on the number of years of experience and the kind of role you are seeking, they would line it up with a senior or a not so senior person, and then they would take a call after that discussion as to what position they can offer to you. Uh, the the mindset per se does not change. The approach does not change. I mean, the whole point here is that you could be a PM and within 6 months you could be an SPM, and that's the beauty about being in product management. It's not like a clear cut. 2 years you serve as PM, and then 2 years you serve as SPM, and then, or 5 years as that, and nothing like that. It could be really fast depending on how you approach the problem, how you transition across the entire thing. So I hope that answers that part, and we're still seeing questions coming in. I'm going to probably have two more here. I got lost with the questions.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to move from data science role to PM? Anyone?
Okay, I'll try to take a stab at it.
Yep.
So I fortunately work with a lot of data scientists, and I think it's definitely not tough. Like I think fortunately in last year or so, I've literally worked with a lot of people from varied backgrounds who have transitioned to product, right? And data science people are definitely good candidates. As long as you have those, you're definitely a smart person if you're a data scientist, right? And as long as you can sort of get yourself out of that data science bubble and sort of get yourself exposed to the business side of things as well, I think you would definitely be the right candidate. And I think people coming from any backgrounds are can transition into a product role, because product role is something that's not very, very well defined. It spans across so many departments, and it's a very cross-functional role, which is why every skill is important for a product manager. And definitely being a data scientist, you have the technical skills, you have all the data science side of things, the know-how of it. And if you can sort of build that business side of things, sort of skills that are required, I think you can very well transition into a product role. That's what I think.
Yeah, and the person already has a structured approach, so that helps.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So we're going to take one last question here, and since Sonupam was the last to address the crowd, and thank you, Sonupam, for that lovely time. I'll ask the question to you. Akhil is working or has worked in the oil and gas industry and currently pursuing an MBA. He hasn't had any work experience related to product development or management. And what would you suggest that he enters this domain without really having PM background on his resume?
Yeah, so did I hear right? So he's currently pursuing his MBA as well?
Correct.
Right? So I think first and foremost, what I would say is that during his MBA, right? So if they have an option of like picking a lot of project management courses, right? So definitely opt for that. So you're setting the base to, capture the concepts, etc. Also, I feel in MBA, you get to do a lot of, internships, etc. Right? So if you are able to get your hands on any kind of internship, right, or like a live project where you could, help out the organization with a certain feature or a certain product. A lot of startups are actually quite open to it, right? During my MBA also, I did start doing certain live projects. And with the help of that, I was truly able to assess that, okay, product management is a side that I would really like to go into, right? So I would highly encourage you start doing some of these, workshops or sessions or live projects, which would really help the base, to start talking about these experiences in your interviews, right? Other than that, I would strongly suggest having like a robust, interview preparation plan, right? Well, let's say you again think of the 4 or 5 broad areas where you need to have an understanding, right? Whether that is customer empathy, whether that is, having an understanding of user personas and how to alleviate the customer pain points, whether that is around metrics, right? So, break it down and then spend a few hours on each of those modules to prep yourself up and to refine your answers, right? And then maybe you can start with a few companies, start interviewing. After every interview, have a good enough feedback to say, if you were to self-assess, what did you do well versus not so well, right? And in the not so well bucket, that's when then you can start working on your answers and also, seeking out for help from mentors or seniors, right? So that is the approach that I would recommend. Yeah.
Thanks, Sonupam. That gives a pretty good answer there. I'm just going to address one question here, which had come up earlier, and we're going to take it to the closing. But this question had come up from Shashank, being from the facility management industry, and the reason I picked it up because I come from a heavy construction background, and then today I'm nowhere close to the construction industry and sort of in the product role. And he wants to know if there are opportunities in the facility management background as a PM, because he doesn't want to change his industry. And my only message out there would be is, be loyal to your job and not the industry. Wherever your job, and that's the beauty of product management, right? You can switch between industries, and once you are in this domain, there's no stopping. So that was a message there. And a quick one to the difference between CIO and CPO. There was a question which Amit had very well sort of put it out there. But I personally believe the CIO is the person who works towards what, the CPO works towards the why, and the CTO works towards the how. And that's primarily how those roles get defined. Just quick ones I wanted to take a jab at towards the end. There are a lot of questions coming in. I think in interest of time, we're going to call it the end here. Before I do that, I'm going to post something on the group, which is basically Pragmatic Leaders has its own platform, a learning platform. We're still building it. It's still in the phase of getting built, but that's what product managers do. They keep building and building. It never ends. What we're giving out here is for all those wonderful audience, the 89 who stayed back, not discounting the ones who had some emergency and had to leave earlier. You can go to this platform, request for early access there, and we'll verify your account and give you a confirmation mail soon. But what's the reason to do that? The moment that confirmation mail comes to you and you access the account, you will have a free course that's again proprietary content of Pragmatic, which is previously sold for about $150. That will be given to you. You can access that at your own convenience and liberty, and take some further interest in product management. I mean, you're already interested because you've been sitting here for over 2 hours. So on that note, I'd give it on to Piyush to take it forward and close it.
Right.
You run the poll, Piyush.
Yes, poll is done.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. So
Piyush, I have a couple of questions on my direct message. I've tried to reply to some of them. You think you can send it across? I'm not sure if we can answer them after the session.
I won't be able to access private chats. So if you can share those messages.
If there are questions like those, just put it on the group chat so that it comes in the chat record. And if not, you can just shoot it out by email to us, and we'll take a response.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So Piyush.
Right. So we also missed adding a sharing link of our platform, TrueMerit.
No, I did it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thanks. So first of all, thanks a lot, Kevin, Atin, Sonupam, Rahul, and Amit for taking out time and conducting such an insightful session for Pragmatic Leaders. A special thanks to all for being such a wonderful audience. I'm sure everyone would have got some concrete takeaways from today's sessions. Now, this is not all. We have another set of amazing speakers joining us tomorrow. and with some hands-on activities as part of this masterclass series. So see you all tomorrow at 8 o'clock p.m. And do feel free to invite your friends to this session tomorrow, as well as whatever you think whosoever you think could benefit from these session, these masterclass series. So please feel free to invite, and have a wonderful evening and stay safe. That's all from Pragmatic Leaders.
Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Sonupam, Rahul, Atin. Nice to see you.
Thanks to all speakers.
And good night.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.